afternoon. I'm Jennifer Baker, president of the Columbia River Economic Development Council, and today is Tuesday, April 7th. And joining me over the internet is Sushil Kumar, who is a public information officer with the U.S. Small Business Administration. And we've invited Sushil into a conversation today to share a little bit more about the CARES Act and some of the programs that have come out of that act, and SBA's role specifically in helping us navigate some of this information. So thank you for being here with me today, Sushil.
Thank you, Jennifer. Much appreciated.
Wonderful. Could you share with us just a brief overview of what the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is and what EIDL Advance is?
Be glad to. The advance is part of an overall loan amount that a business potentially could qualify for. And so when the applicant goes to COVID-19 relief.sba.gov, he or she fills out the application, whether you're a business smaller than 500 or greater, sole prop or independent contractor, a cooperative, or a business that is larger than 500, or a private nonprofit. After they self-certify, the question leads them down to owner's information, what the business does. At the very end, they're asked a question: would you like to be considered for an advance of up to $10,000? And if the answer is yes, basically, as soon as they hit submit, within 3 to 5 business days, the money is funded into their bank account. The particulars behind the advance are that they don't have to repay it if for some reason the loan is turned down. If the loan is approved, then it becomes part of a larger package. So let's say a business owner gets approved for $50,000. The advance then has been paid out the amount of 10. The remaining $40,000 then gets dispersed at the proper time. That's the mechanics behind the advance loan process. It is forgivable to the extent that if you don't get approved, then you don't have to repay it. Now, what is an economic injury disaster loan? It's really a working capital installment loan meant to cover all of your current liabilities that you may have on your balance sheet, which you're unable to pay as a result of a economic downturn, a revenue shortfall, so on and so forth. So it covers the gamut of product, vendors payable, people, payroll expense, rent, mortgages, bank debt that you might have to pay on in the form of lines of credit payments, and or current portion long-term debt due. It covers the package of it all. Maximum repayment of 30 years is being used for amortization purposes. $2 million, fixed interest rate, 2.75% for private nonprofits, and 3.75% for businesses of all sizes. No fees, no points, no closing costs, no prepayment penalty from the SBA. Just $100 UCC1 filing with the state. So that, in a nutshell, is the advance and the program all in a nutshell.
Great. Well, thank you for that. That's a wonderfully concise rundown. We've heard from a couple of companies who are confused a little bit because they've heard the term SBA emergency grant and are confused what the difference is between an EIDL advance and this grant program. Maybe you could help us with that clarification.
And given the fact that eventually the advance, if it's not, the application is not approved, becomes a grant, a lot of folks are using that syntax, if you will, incorrectly. It really is an advance. And if you get approved, as I mentioned, for a larger package, the $10,000 becomes part of the larger package. It only becomes a grant forgivable 2 ways. One, if the loan application is denied, there's no expectation for the note to be repaid. So in a sense, it becomes a grant. Or you're approved and you take portions for payroll that you use for the EIDL under the PPP, and it's forgiven. And I'll stay clear of the PPP side because that's a local lender discretion piece, but for the purposes of an advance becoming a grant, that's where it fits in.
All right. Thank you for that.
Of course.
We've received some questions from other companies indicating that they applied for an EIDL a couple of weeks ago and they haven't heard back yet and are unsure if they need to take further action. And then kind of a second wave of inquiries along the same lines is that companies who have already applied, maybe they applied before the EIDL advance option was available. And so they're wondering what to do, if they need to reapply or otherwise be in contact with SBA.
Let me start answering the second part first. The advance streamlined application was rolled out beginning Monday of last week. It was the 30th of March. So for those applicants who applied for the loan without the advance, so in other words, they applied the Sunday prior, if they want the advance, reapply. If they don't want the advance, sit tight. For those applicants, now to part one, for those applicants who applied initially, they're now in the sweet spot, 2 to 3 weeks of analysis and funding 5 days after they're analyzed and approved. They're in that sweet spot. You feel free to call 1-800-659-2955 to get status updates, but be prepared for an onslaught of calls prior to you, because this is such an unprecedented, unparalleled economic event in the history of these United States. So be prepared to have to wait perhaps a little longer than you normally would have to get your question answered. So if it's not been 3 weeks, I wouldn't make the phone call, only because it's still within that time frame. If it's been longer than 3 weeks, which it still wouldn't be, because this whole process started right around the middle of March, late March, for each of the states to come online. So feel free to wait till the week of the 15th or so before you start making those calls, because chances are actions have not been taken on those applications.
Okay, that kind of lends itself to the next question, which is, if a company does apply through the streamlined process that has more recently come available, it's the case that SBA is unduplicating applications. So the company applies through their EIN or their ITIN number, and the system will reconcile that that's already an application in the system. So they don't need to worry about having the appearance of applying for 2 loans. Is that correct?
That's very much correct.
Okay, that'll be a relief to some folks who are interested in applying for the EIDL advance. So we appreciate that clarification.
Of course.
A couple of questions have also come in pertaining to mutual exclusivity. So if someone applies for an EIDL, can they also apply for a Paycheck Protection Program loan? And I know that these are 2 different loan programs through 2 different entities, but maybe we could talk just for a moment about the distinctions and who people would apply to. And then on the PPP side, we can walk through a website where people can find some additional resources.
Fair enough. So during these unprecedented crises, what Congress has done is open up an additional avenue for our commercial banking brethren, credit unions, lenders, non-banks to participate in the Paycheck Protection Act. Those funds are administered through the local banks. The economic injury disaster loan is being administered directly through the Treasury. So our program covers the gamut of working capital needs across the board. The Paycheck Protection Act covers payroll expenses, rent, interest on the mortgage side, utilities, things along those lines. And the most friendly website will be coming from the Department of Treasury, home.treasury.gov. And if you were to click on the red banner up top, where businesses seeking direct relief, you would click on your particular situation, if you're a borrower, on the borrower application form for additional details. This is strictly being applied to your local lender, your credit union, so on and so forth.
Okay, so a company visiting the Treasury website can find out a little bit more about where to apply through their local lender, how much money they qualify for, what the eligibility requirements, what the use of proceeds would look like, and then also Treasury's definition and implementation language on how much of that PPP loan could be forgiven if the company applies for it. So
That's correct.
The correct reference point for companies who are really trying to navigate the Paycheck Protection Program will be this home.treasury.gov website. And we'll make sure
Correct.
that's posted also on our CRDC website.
Correct. It goes into the terms and conditions, and applicants need to know. Both of them are economic in nature. One's more defined from a payroll perspective. One is much more on the much larger balance sheet income statement standpoint.
Okay, well, that's helpful. I think companies are concerned they don't want to apply for one program and be disqualified for the other. But these are two distinct programs lined up to be applied for through different entities.
Correct.
And do you have any advice for companies concerned about how to navigate these multiple funding streams and any things that they should watch out for?
The only advice I would share would be to talk to your CPA, talk to your trusted financial advisor, talk to your lender. Because it's lender dependent, documentation would be specific to the lender. As far as the economic injury side is concerned, call us, talk to our network of small business development centers, women's business centers, SCORE chapters, so on and so forth, for the purposes of garnering additional information to make an informed decision of which program to use for what benefit, because they have two different policy prescriptions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So a few companies have reached out and said, I've already had to lay off employees, but I'm interested in applying for the Paycheck Protection Program. And that list of references or resources who you just shared would be the best, or that would be your advice for how a company can decide if they indeed want to pursue the PPP?
Absolutely.
Okay, so for companies listening in, the best way to proceed with a potential PPP application, if you've already laid off employees, would be to reach out to your accountant and really seek to discern the timing of some of the programs, and also your employees' applications for unemployment insurance, and work to reconcile with a business advisor, with an accountant, what makes the most sense for you.
Correct.
And you can find the rollout information for the PPP on the Treasury website. As a business owner, as a sole proprietor or an individual, individuals have come forth and asked if they're eligible to apply for EIDL. And you had recommended that we take a look at the, let's see, let me find the right slide here. The
COVID-19 relief.sba.gov, into that website page.
over here.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Of course.
And so for those companies who are trying to see, or individuals trying to see if they're eligible, if they click on the COVID-19 relief page, maybe you can walk us through the eligible applicant categories.
And basically, it's a radio button that you pick and choose which one fits your scenario. First radio button, pretty self-evident, business not more than 500 employees. Second one is specific to sole prop, with or without employees, or 1099 independent contractors. Applicants are cooperative with not more than 500 employees is radio button number 3. If you're an ESOP with no more than 500, that would be 4. If you're a travel business concern, but with not more than 500, then you would list number 5. If you're a business, agriculture cooperative, aquaculture enterprise, nursery, producer cooperative, there are size standards that apply. If you fit in that category, then would be number 6. If you're a business with larger than 500 employees, you would click on number 7. All nonprofits would click on number 8. Self-certified down below on the bottom of the page that you're not involved in anything illegal. And then you would continue and start answering questions specific to your chosen radio button.
Okay. And I'm understanding that that it takes clicking through the application to get to the eventual EIDL advance checkbox.
Correct.
And that's going to happen somewhere around the additional.
Somewhere after the summer.
Okay. Perfect. So folks can be looking for that. There's a little bit of confusion and navigation from business owners on how much of an economic injury disaster loan threshold they should apply for. And I know that's something that's very individualized for people to navigate. But could you share a little bit about what companies are eligible to apply for and how they might think through how much they need?
Generally speaking, a business owner needs to look at their ability to withstand a disaster. Since this is so unprecedented and numbers are being bandied about that the average business has only 2 weeks, perhaps they consider applying for a 3-month time frame or maybe a 6-month time frame and figure out what's the maximum they need to get to make sure that they're able to stay above water and float during these particular scenarios. So perhaps they apply for, depending on the situation, 6 months or 3 months. It's an individual situation. And the way the actual economic injury is calculated is, what is the corresponding number for revenue and expenses a year ago at this time? So let's compare February to February of last year. And let's say the business owner had $100,000 worth of sales last year, and this year they only have 20,000. Mathematically, that number is 80,000, and mathematically there is a gross profit percentage that comes out as a result, which would be decreased by the sum of $80,000. So the calculus really is, can the business afford to repay $80,000 over a 30-year time frame at a fixed interest rate of 3.75% over a 30-year term? If the answer is yes, for the most part, the money is theirs. So that's the mindset, as long as, credit's in order, you got repayment, things along those lines. Entire state of Washington is a disaster area, so that part of the eligibility is covered. So in the eyes of the business owner, can they afford to repay at that interest rate a specific number that they need to stay in business for by subtracting what they would have done from what they did do over a time frame? If the answer is yes, for the most part, the loan is theirs.
Okay. Now, how quickly does a loan recipient have to start repaying on an economic injury disaster loan?
It's a 12-month deferment time frame. We're waiting because of the unprecedented crises. It's taken a bit of time I would think, that for the real economy to gain traction again. And usually the 12-month deferment period is up to the administrator. I've seen only a few times where they used the year deferment. Hurricane Harvey was one, and Hurricane Sandy, if I recall correctly, was also one of them. So basically the deferment period is set by the administrator based on economic circumstances. And so no payments are required for a 12-month period.
Okay, so that truly is a bit of relief for a company to start gaining back some momentum.
Correct. And the idea behind the working capital loan, both sides, whether it's the PPP or the economic injury disaster loan, the mindset is maximum liquidity. Pay your people, pay the product, be turnkey ready, so that when the order comes, we're ready to open. You don't have to hire your people. You don't have to go out and for product. Your shelves are stocked. You can deliver the service that you're in business for. Your people are ready to go because they've been paid. Dust off the cobwebs, and here we come. That's the mindset behind both of these liquidity measures. Staff them, pay them, let's get going.
Great. Well, and both of the things that we've already discussed are different and independent from the SBA loan debt relief. And so we've had a couple of people ask, do I need to apply for debt relief, and does that interface with EIDL and PPP? And so what I understand about that is that unless you had an existing SBA loan, you would not apply for debt relief. Or
That's correct.
There's not an application process. Maybe you could talk us through that a little bit.
And basically, they need to contact the local district office and get language for it. And there's also language about debt relief on SBA.gov. If you would click on press releases, there's language specifically what the applicant needs to do. There's an automatic deferment for homes and business loans under the disaster. There's language from the district office as to what they need to do if they have a 504-7A, talk to a lender. So the specificity of the type of borrower under the SBA umbrella is on the SBA.gov website under press releases.
Okay, well, that's also very helpful. In a very short amount of time, you're delivering a really condensed, action-packed dose of information, and we appreciate it 100%, 100 times over.
Thank you, Jennifer, because these times require people to have succinct and very pointed answers instead of they're already drinking out of 3, 4, 5 fire hydrants and trying to gasp for air. The last thing I want to do is add any level of additional fire hydrants for them to drink out of. So appreciate the feedback.
Well, we appreciate the clarity. I have one last question that I would like to pose for you, which is, if a company is applied for other philanthropic support, is that a prohibitive factor in a company, that same company also applying for EIDL or PPP?
It's an honor-based system. There is a duplication of benefits that the SBA will deduct those proceeds that were received by the company from another source in the form of a grant, and deduct that from the sums of money that we potentially might lend. So it's an honor system. If there's self-certification, we'll take it for what it's worth. The PPP side is more of a payroll-specific scenario, so the sums of money that somebody receives does not go into the calculation on the piece of it, but they need to talk to their lender about that specific part. On the EIDL part, duplication benefits is a no-no.
All right. Well, I just want to take one more moment here and share with folks the CREDC landing page. I'm going to go back to my my web browser here and let people know that if you land at credc.org and click on our COVID-19 business resources banner, you can take a look scrolling down at some of the resources we've talked about today. We've been hosting webinars and web chats with experts on how to enter the government procurement market, what type of marketing and cybersecurity is important for small businesses and businesses at large to be considering right now. We have one of our first calls with Sushil on March 18th that was recorded, and we'll replace that or append that with our conversation today. And just know that we are working on a daily basis to update and present for you the most current information. We know that these programs are evolving just about on a daily basis. For example,
Absolutely.
Today, the Working Washington Small Business Emergency Grant for Washington State came live just this afternoon. So I know we'll be getting a lot of inquiries about that. But on our website, you can see the standard information brief on EIDL program. So those are some of the slides that Sushil has shared with us up to now. You can take a look at the SBA's table of small business size standards and other resources that we've been discussing. So our team, as these programs change, has been working to make sure that you're able to see the most up-to-date information. So please visit us at credc.org. Also, I wanted to share on our website that there is a survey button here kind of at the top of the page. And what we're doing is trying to collect your statements of economic injury as a business owner or a business manager. And that's really helping CREDC as a nonprofit organization share the story of economic impact with policymakers locally and in Washington State. So it's important that we get feedback from companies of all different sizes and across all different industries, so that when the timing is appropriate, we can be focusing our efforts on different grant making or industry building activities responsive to the feedback we receive. So just a quick note on resources available at CREDC. And clicking back to Sushil here with the Office of Disaster Assistance. Sushil, we're so thankful for you joining us today and appreciate your support.
I appreciate you and the audience that you're offering for me to talk with and create an awareness for. And I look forward to other conversations over the next few days or weeks.
Wonderful. Well, wishes for a good afternoon.
Likewise, right back at you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.